We've been stuck at home for almost a year now. I know, it's crazy. Now, take that year and multiply it by 10. That's how long it usually takes for a vaccine to be developed and then for it to get to market. But the COVID-19 vaccine was developed in under 8 months. That's almost 20 times faster. So, what made this vaccine be developed so fast? And how did we realize that the process was so inefficient before? Let's take a look. Number one, the coronavirus wasn't completely new to scientists. We obviously hadn't seen the virus causing COVID-19 called SARS-CoV-2 before, but we'd seen plenty of other coronaviruses like SARS and MERS before, and our past research there helped us now. It's kind of like fighting a villain's kid. They basically have the same superpowers, so if you just pivot slightly, you can fight them. Number two, there are lots of players in the field. Even though we only see the main leaders like Pfizer and Moderna, there are hundreds of companies and thousands of researchers working on a vaccine for this one disease. And the sheer number of innovative minds working on this problem makes research go by so much faster. Number three, vaccines aren't going through the same approval processes. Companies are able to submit their data in a rolling submission instead of all at once like usual. It's like submitting your article for feedback and editing it throughout instead of submitting it at the end and realizing there was something majorly wrong. Number four, vaccine development is getting plenty of financial support. Innovation is basically a money's game. So with huge economies like the US pouring billions of dollars into developing and manufacturing vaccines, the process is obviously being sped up. Number five, vaccines aren't going through the same phases for clinical trials. There are normally 4 phases. The preclinical ones are done on animals and are usually for safety. Phase 1 is about 100 people, phase 2 1,000, and phase 3 has thousands and thousands of people. Now, usually these phases are done sequentially, meaning one after another. But with millions of lives at stake, companies were given the go-ahead to do preclinical and phase 1 trials at the same time, and that's unprecedented. And finally, vaccines are using new technology. We know about mRNA technology because Pfizer and Moderna are using it, and the tech is super duper cool. But before we take a closer look at it, what even is a vaccine's goal? It's to train the immune system. So in case a real infection does happen, the immune system is able to fight it off easily. And in this case, scientists found that the spike protein on coronaviruses was the best way to trigger the immune system. So with that in mind, we're going to take a little trip. We're going to go super small and travel into our bodies. First up, we can see some SARS-CoV-2 mRNA enclosed in a lipid nanoparticle. That is a lot of big words, so let's break it down. DNA is the recipe for our cells, and that's turned into messenger RNA, or mRNA. Think of mRNA as a little programmer sitting behind a computer coding our proteins that make our entire bodies function. What we're doing is putting virus mRNA into our own bodies so we can recreate those spike proteins. And lipid nanoparticle, that just acts as a box around the mRNA that protects it from getting destroyed once it enters our body. I think it's time we head inside the cell and we can see the mRNA going through the exact process we talked about. It's then turned into a spike and some of the protein fragments are left. It's kind of cramped in the cell though, so if we head out, we can see our cell is starting to look like a coronavirus. It's kind of scary, but don't worry, it's exactly what we want. It sends an alarm to the immune system, intruder, intruder. And this is where our B cells come in. They latch onto those spikes and they stop the cell from multiplying or from attacking other cells, and they also mark it for death. Finally come our knights in shining armor, the killer T cells. They do exactly what it sounds like. They get rid of the cell. And even though this tech is absolutely mind-blowing, we shouldn't get carried away. Why did it have to take a pandemic for us to realize how inefficient the process is? And more importantly, what's there to prevent it from happening again? To find out, let's learn about the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, or CEPI for short. They do not have the most interesting name, but they're working with countries like Canada, Belgium, Australia, and organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to create a platform for disease X. It sounds like it's from a sci-fi movie, but the concept behind it is pretty simple. and it's on the WHO's list of diseases to research, so you know it's pretty serious. Disease X just represents the fact that we know another pandemic is coming soon and that we're not prepared. So, what's your friend Seppi doing about it? They're built on three pillars. First is preparedness. That's creating vaccines for emerging diseases. Then it's response. That's accelerating research. And the third one is sustainability, what I think we should focus on. So, how do we create vaccines more quickly over time? We need to consider CEPI's funding target, $1 billion. It seems like a huge amount of money, and it is. But consider how much the US alone spent on manufacturing Moderna vaccines, $3.2 billion. You can start to see where the problem is. But I don't want to end this talk on a sad note. I want to tell you what we can do. So consider how much the US spent on developing Moderna vaccines, just $472 million. They weren't the only ones funding it, but it just goes to show that if we're not trying to create a vaccine on a limited timeline with limited resources, we can seriously cut down on costs. And that means creating vaccines more quickly and also more efficiently. So, what are some actionable steps we can take? Number one is surveillance. This is where we failed pretty badly this time with COVID. We need to make sure that we identify if the threat is coming so we can expand that timeline. Number two is funding. It should not take a pandemic for governments and institutions to start pouring money into a process that can save lives. And number three is collaboration. With so many labs working on the same issue, it became much easier to share insights, and we need to create programs that can continue that in the future. It goes beyond these steps, though. We as a society need to move more towards proactive measures instead of just reactive ones. We need to make sure we act before we react. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Samson, organizer of TKS Community Talks. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to check out our channel for more insightful and inspiring talks from a community of young people training to change the world.